Hey everyone, this is Steve Good, and welcome back to our next episode of The Coin Chat. I am joined by my good friend and entrepreneur, David Wen, and today we are going to talk about how to get started in cryptocurrency.
Hi everyone, it's great to be back. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you, Steve, if you had a chance to find out more about HODL and the backstory with that, because it sure looks like a funny typo.
In fact, I did have a look at it, and it's kind of a funny story. It goes back apparently to a discussion that was taking place on Bitcoin chat back in 2013, where apparently a forum user with the Japanese name GameQB had posted something like, "I am hodling," and that apparently led to a whole discussion and a rant and what have you. And in the end, it's kind of just held on. I suppose you could say everyone's kind of chosen to keep the word HODL. Hashtag HODL is trending quite strongly for anything related to holding on to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And then there's a group of people who decided to come up with an acronym for it, just for fun. Hold on for dear life. So you could argue that I'm sure someone intended for it to be hodling or not, but that is the backstory. HODL.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that's, now that I know more about it, that's what I feel like I'm doing right now, right? Because we've seen some pretty dramatic price changes in Bitcoin in particular the last couple of weeks, and I'm just like, I'm not really sure what to do being new to this. It seems like, I could buy more Bitcoin, I could maybe sell, but because I don't have any idea what is going on, I'm not really sure if doing anything is wise.
Yeah, so I've had a few people ask me that as well this past week on our Telegram channel, and what's really interesting for me is that if you look at the general population and you ask yourself how many people are actually already in the coin, it's probably less than 1% of the total population of the world. Maybe it's 1%. I mean, no one really knows for sure because we don't know who has what because everything's anonymous. But there's a lot of speculation about how many accounts are out there, and it's not that many. It does kind of make you think if there's that few people already in it, but there's a growing understanding of it, an awareness of it, and people are beginning to ask the same question, how do I get started? Where do I start? Then the demand would presumably outstrip the supply, since the supply is limited in the number of coins that are out there. There's been a lot of analysis done by various parties on CNBC. I've read some really good articles about it. Some people projecting it goes to 50,000 or 100,000. Of course, it's all speculative.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy numbers. But if you look at the supply versus the demand is continuing to increase. The supply is fixed. Bitcoin's not going away. So it would seem logical to assume that over time it will continue to increase in value. But there will be ups and downs. People will profit take. And, you have to HODL when those things happen.
And, yeah, I don't know.
How's that for weaving together your question with the answer?
That's pretty good. So, if I'm in the market to buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in general, like you had told me probably, I don't know, 3 months ago when I first started in this, where I could go to get started. And, so I went with Coinbase, but I understand that there's many ways to buy. Well, I don't know if it's many ways, but there's multiple ways to buy cryptocurrencies. So can you elaborate for somebody who is interested in getting started what to do?
Sure. So
or where they can look.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, there's actually a couple of different ways to get started. I mean, if you kind of break it down in terms of the things you're used to doing today, one is you can go to ATMs. The second is you could do something online like a bank transfer. And the third is you could do things with credit card payments. So for each of these different areas, there are, ways of doing it. There are a number of Bitcoin ATMs that are beginning to spring up around the US and Europe and Asia. So, of course, from those, you can just walk in, deposit your money, and put it straight into your Bitcoin account or Bitcoin wallet. Then there's the online solutions, of which there's not many, but there's a number of them out there. And this is where you're converting, of course, again, your fiat currency into Bitcoin for starters. That's companies like Blockchain, localbitcoins.com, Coinify, Bitso, Coinbase, Gemini. All of those are different flavors of the same thing where you can effectively wire transfer money in from your bank account straight into your account with those providers.
Okay, so when you say fiat currency, this is not related to the Italian car.
No, obviously not. No, it would be great if it was, but everyone's depositing a car and getting bitcoins in exchange. No, so fiat currency, actually, fiat goes back to actually an old version, an old meaning in Latin, which means it had to do with an official order given by someone who has power. That's where it comes from, and its definition is an authoritative but arbitrary order. These are the definitions from the history, but actually it's a term that really it's defining the fact that a government has the right of power to create what we call a currency. The term fiat has kind of become more prevalent now today by the mere fact that we have digital currency and we needed to distinguish the difference between what was called a fiat currency or is called a fiat currency, which are currencies that are created by the government, versus ones that have been created by the global world, which we call digital currencies. And interestingly enough, I did a bit of research on this one as well, just because I was curious about it recently. And it turns out that the first beginnings of fiat or printed currency of any form started from the Yuan dynasty in China a long time ago, and has just kind of evolved from there. But the term fiat, of course, didn't come from China. It's just that it's the term that was used to define the creation of money through government. That's the way the term has been used or applied.
So I guess there's going to be a time when governments are going to be, it's probably coming soon, perhaps, that governments are going to be issuing some sort of digital fiat currency, but I guess that's a topic for another episode.
I mean, I know we're talking about what is cryptocurrency, but it's an interesting thing you've just brought up. So there are things happening already. There's a group of nations that's called BRICS. It's a trading group, which refers to Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, China. BRICS, yeah, right, and China, yeah, of course. So I got that backwards, but yeah. And so the BRICS nation have actually been for a while researching the concept of cryptocurrency, much to do with the fact that when they trade between each other, they have to convert their own local currencies into dollar and then convert the dollar back into their other currency. And it's not very efficient.
Meaning the US dollar.
Correct. Everything's going through the USD. So by creating their own cryptocurrency called the BRICS cryptocurrency, whatever the name will finally be, there is an initiative that they're undergoing now to investigate and research this as a block group of nations so that they can actually enable trade to be more efficient between each other without requiring the USD to be in the middle, and they'd all be trading on the same currency because it's a currency they create amongst themselves. So the beginnings of that have already started, interestingly enough.
Sounds like something that could be a potentially great opportunity for digital currency world in general.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think we're going to see more of these types of things happening. I mean, Sweden recently announced that they would start accepting Bitcoin or start investigating using it as a more mainstream currency, mainly because in Sweden you'll find that you can go everywhere, do everything with credit cards, and there's almost no cash. It's almost a completely cashless society already. So they recently said that they would start considering Bitcoin as a valid form of currency within the country, which is kind of...
So this tells me, I mean, basically, as somebody who's just new to this world of digital currency, it's like the next thing, right? We as just individuals probably want to get involved with this so that we can at least have an understanding of what we might expect down the line in the not too distant future with just using these currencies in our daily lives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a growing trend toward being able to use the currency. I mean, it's true to say that it's very hard to spend Bitcoin on its own right, but I mentioned, but I did mention
that reminds me.
Go on.
That reminds me of that story about you've heard about the story with the guy that in England that paid 10,000 Bitcoin for somebody to deliver pizzas.
You're kidding me.
Probably 7 years ago.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is like, and they were Papa John's pizzas. They weren't even it wasn't anything special. It was just at the time there was no way apparently to really spend your Bitcoin. And this is when Bitcoin was worth very little.
So we've got to go and find out now. We've got to contact Papa John's and find out what did they do with the 10,000 Bitcoins, or is it just an urban legend? Because if they've got the Bitcoin, did they just sell it on, or was it just the delivery guy that took it? It'd be great to find out if there's some truth to that. That's a really funny story.
Yeah, there's some sources out there. I know that if you Google something like 10,000 Bitcoin pizza, you'll find a number of stories about it. That's like sources.
So David, you kind of gave me a mini assignment last week to research HODL. I mean, it was sort of implied in the last podcast. So here's my assignment for you, for all of our listeners. So could you go and find out more about this Papa John story and see if you can find any truth in it? I think it would be fantastic to find out what's true and what's urban legend on the 10,000 Bitcoin for pizza story.
Sure. Yeah, I'll look into it. I'll dig up some sources, and I've seen the guy's name, so I can pull it up.
All right, cool. And maybe, you know what? Maybe we could even get him on one of the podcasts. That'd be even more fun to see if we could actually get him on here and he could tell himself what happened, and we could at least give it a try.
Yeah, though I don't know that he'd really like talking about that, because that's probably like the worst moment of anybody's life. That's a pretty bad thing to have happen, right?
You never know. There might have been a positive outcome from it as well. That's why we'd love to talk with him. Anyway, so just to kind of swing back. So we talked about ATMs. We talked about depositing through a number of, call them exchanges, although they're not really, they're sort of exchanges, but places of depositing fiat to crypto. And the third way that actually that's out there that I didn't really mention, but I'll just mention briefly now, is there's people that are allowing you to make deposits via credit cards. And there's one example I've seen called coinpayments.com, and they're using it for transactions like on websites for buying goods. And you can transact from your fiat currency credit cards to getting Bitcoin. So there are a number of different solutions out there going that direction. And then flipping the other direction, there are other things you can do, like transferring your Bitcoin to credit cards and spending it as well.
What are some of the differences or advantages or disadvantages of the ways of buying Bitcoin that you just mentioned? Like transaction fees, more or less in certain ways, or something's more secure.
The biggest challenge I see generally is to get from fiat into Bitcoin as a starting point is the most expensive. The vendors charge a lot of money just across the board. But once you're inside the crypto world, to move your money or to convert your money from one coin to another, fees tend to be fairly reasonable. They're more in line with typical transaction costs that a bank would charge. It varies from platform to platform. But once you're into the world of exchanges where you're actually, investing, buying the coins and looking to, for example, some people just buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin. Other people are interested in what's called the alternative coins, buying the Bitcoin in order to then buy other coins later on. The coin companies that we talked about last week, or the platforms, or other coins. But different people have different strategies or different levels of interest in terms of how they want to trade in Bitcoin.
That sort of shed some light on it for me, because I'm into I've gotten through that phase where I've got fiat into crypto, and then other questions that come to mind is somebody again who's basically, I would say I've more than dipped a toe in the water, but I haven't jumped in the pool entirely yet. Is how do you trade? Like what do you do as far as like how much should I put into this? The way I looked at it is like I'm not putting more than I'm willing to lose because it is a speculative investment.
That's
at this stage. Also, it still comes with all of the same questions as far as other investment asset classes, right? Like how much do I buy? How long do I hold?
Right. So the thing I find is that you're absolutely right. Whether you buy stocks, bonds, a house, they all have value. They all have the potential to increase in value over time. And that's probably, I would say it's true for cryptocurrency as well, specifically Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a few of the more larger cap coins that have a lot of momentum. They have a lot of established credibility. The main difference with crypto right now is just because of the fact that there's a limited supply and there's a large population of people out there who aren't in it. And when the coin moves, it can move quite a lot. I mean, the volatility on some of the trading goes on is pretty phenomenal. I think that'll level out over time. So, really what I say to people is when you're looking at investing in Bitcoin as part of your investment, like anything, only invest what you're willing to lose. It's not like Bitcoin's going to go from $7,000 down to zero because it's gaining momentum. More and more people are using it. It's a value that people are using and accepting for transactions around the world. But we have to always be conscious of the fact that you might buy it. It might go down 5%, 10% one day and go back up the next day. So, start small and work your way up.
This also reminds me of like the weather where I went to school. Like they're like, you don't like the weather? oh, just wait 5 minutes, right? Because it's constantly changing, right? So not to say that it's going to be better or worse in terms of Bitcoin. We think it's going to gradually increase in value, but I mean, over time, yeah, in between, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
More so than like
Absolutely.
a blue chip stock at this point.
And the other thing, a lot of people ask me, I really want to get started, but, I can't afford $7,000 to buy a Bitcoin. How am I going to get started? And I always kind of laugh and I say, it's not a share and it works completely differently. I mean, Bitcoin, you can spend $100 to buy a Bitcoin. You could buy $2,000 worth of Bitcoin. You could buy pretty much whatever amount you want to buy. You're not forced to buy a single value of one. You can buy 8 decimal places out for Bitcoin, which is what most of the exchanges out there support. That's
so
not
it's
a
more
problem.
like shares of a mutual fund, right? You just put in how much money you want to put
Absolutely.
in,
That's a
and
great, yeah,
they
absolutely.
tell you how many shares you get,
Totally.
or how many coins.
Yeah, that's a great example. So, I mean, you're right, because if you go into Vanguard and you have a Vanguard account, you'll see that you have decimal points for your number of shares, because it's all being calculated out by dividing it by number of people by the amount of money that's in the account. Absolutely. That's the same way that all the cryptocurrencies work. There's nothing done on single values of having 1, 10, or 100. It's all done on decimal points, and it just continues on that way.
You're past the second grade level of math now. You can do more than just whole numbers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so for people that are thinking about getting into this, they can go in and they define the amount of money that they want to invest, and then there's a number of ways to get into that. What else should they be cognizant of when they're contemplating getting started in Bitcoin or crypto?
I mean, like anything, when you're going to invest in something, some people are passive and they just buy and they just let it sit there. And we've heard tons of stories about people that had Bitcoin 5 or 6 years ago. Some that, I think I may have mentioned to you the guy that had 50 Bitcoins and then he lost his access to his wallet and his private keys and he was out and can't get the money. There's other people who are really consciously interested in it. They're following it every day. They want to see what's happening. Some of them are looking at stock charts, Bitcoin stock charts or coin charts. Some people are following the news on various, Coin Telegram or other news channels. And it's really, I think it's up to the individuals. Everyone has their own way of wanting to invest and trade. But I think it's always good, like anything, if you invest in something, it's always good to be aware of and, in touch with what's happening. But, the crypto world is moving so quickly and so it's evolving, it's changing, it's constant. It's always good to kind of stay in touch with what's happening, but I think everyone's got to kind of make their own choice about how much they want to be involved or engaged in it, to be honest.
So there's a lot of news around all of these coins and currencies that we see on both the mainstream sites and sites that have popped up to provide that news specifically in this sector or this industry. But I guess because it's moving so quickly, we're not going to see like a dummies book on Bitcoin, or when we do see a dummies book on Bitcoin, that means like it's probably become mainstream and the growth has maybe slowed down a little bit.
Oh, you mean like a Bitcoin for dummies?
Yeah, if there's a Bitcoin for dummies book, like you're too late.
Yeah,
right?
the Bitcoin for dummies book were for all the people who didn't buy Bitcoin when it was 10 cents, which is probably all of us. I think it's too late.
and there's still no Bitcoin for dummies book. I'm guessing here, but I don't think there is.
I doubt it. But to be honest, I think the problem that we generally find with all of crypto is still that the number of systems and platforms that are out there to help the average person get started is still very, very small. And they're limited in many, many ways in terms of the features we're used to on so many other dimensions. It's like most things in tech, most things that I've seen in my career, in my life in technology, it always starts off with a bunch of techies that have created something really cool and they get it and the rest of us are wondering what it does. And then sooner or later, a bunch of us start to figure out what it does and say, oh, that's really cool, but the user interface is terrible on this thing. And then it kind of progresses a bit further. And then business people start getting involved saying, hey, I kind of get this, but it's not just the user interface. There's a business process and there's a way of using it. And we could transact these ways. And it always happens the same way that I've seen in technology. It always starts with good techies with great ideas and leads its way up through to becoming more business savvy or business usable, and the techies continue to stay involved as techies, but we just make the thing more usable for the general population. That's a very common thread or trend we see.
And that's what leads to like the large growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're seeing right now is you've got a couple of those platforms I listed before, which are pretty good user interfaces. I've used quite a few of them in one way or another just to try them out. They all have one thing in common, which is for the purposes of converting from fiat to crypto, they're all pretty decent platforms. They're not cheap, but they are decent platforms to get started. The next
I gotta say though,
go on.
It was kind of a pain. So I used Coinbase, I'm based in the U.S. and they have a number of requirements where it's I think it's called the Know Your Customer requirement. So the part of it is the user interface, but also part of it is the reporting and regulatory requirements, which are still, from what I gather, pretty undefined, or not undefined, but they're not well defined as they will be later on in the future, especially with a number of issues around regulations and taxes. But we don't have to get into that. But the process of signing up to one of these services was like it wasn't seamless, it wasn't flawless. There were a couple of times where it's like the app. I tried to do it online first on the computer, and then I had to do it with the app, and then so it's not easy yet. And I think that's what you were getting at, where it's still early, so it's still kind of on the techie side, and it's not quite mainstream yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still things that need to be done. I mean, the KYC part is really, the know your customer piece is really about more of the government influencing, asking that if people are working in crypto, which they can't track and they can't see, then at least they can ask the suppliers or the vendors that are working within crypto to just make sure they're capturing some basic information about who the individuals are. Now, where that leads in the future, I don't know, because all these companies are still private companies and they still have the right to be. When you're in crypto, there's also the possibility of money being used for illegal ways, and that causes another set of problems, because of course we don't want it to be used for, or maybe we do want it to be used for, buying and selling guns and arms, or laundering money. But I don't think that's what the general population wants. But that's the positive and negative of anything, right? I mean, you can go around with a bag of money and hand it to people and it's untraceable, or you can send Bitcoin to people and it's untraceable. It's the same output. It's just another mechanism for doing the same thing. I think that regardless of platform, all the platforms are still trying to get to grips with the volume of users that are coming on board and the speed in which they're doing so. And that causes a set of problems, because you have to scale your organization to support that. The systems have to be designed to support that level of volume as well. So it does create a set of challenges for, I think, all the vendors that are out there trying to enable us to get into the market. So as we talked about, the user interfaces are starting to come online, and now the processes are the next level that we have to deal with, which is what the business people start to look at, who are the bigger investors, the venture capitalists, the experienced senior business people who are out there having done these things before, and now they start to jump in. So it's all part of a process, really, of evolution. Just the speed in which it's happening is so much faster than anything in technology I've ever seen. I mean, the internet bubble was at one speed.
But we're going to experience these growing pains while it's in the build-out phase, essentially.
You do it with every time a new technology comes along. I mean, if you look at the way cloud started and where it is today, it's transformed massively. It wasn't even like this 5 years ago. You couldn't even get enough cloud computing 5 years ago to run something that you wanted to run. And now a bank can run massive components of their operation in cloud, because the physical capability and capacities are available that weren't available before. So it's the same kind of thing.
The good old days, right? Like when we say the good old days, like those days weren't even the same when we look back on the era that we're living in now, because things are changing so rapidly from day to day that nothing's staying the same. And I guess that pace of change is just accelerating. And
I think what I see is that if I look at the way traditional banking works as an example, and the speed of transactions and the mechanisms that are in place, and you compare it to the way that cryptocurrency works, in the sense of, I can send you crypto, it goes through a process, it's electronic, it's validated, confirmed, and you receive it. Doing that within banking, as we talked about in the last episode, takes a lot longer. And the layers on top of crypto, where companies are building platforms to solve that, it's just a whole different game now in terms of the way that they're enabling things to work faster. But the platforms are there to enable that, and that's the difference. And I think that's the transformation that we're seeing now.
I totally agree with you, because I've been on the consumer side of like various banking experiences. The ones that really stand out in my mind are like the things that relate to, let's say, mortgages and refinancing and stuff like that. And it was never, ever not a pain. I've done that multiple times. Every time it's been a pain, and it's always, whatever the institution or the bank, it doesn't matter. Like, just by nature, it's a pain. And I'm looking at crypto and I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be nice if we were able to just streamline a whole bunch of these things, which is what I think a big part of the development and the applications that are going to come about in the next several years is going to help address. And then, as somebody that has bought some Bitcoin, let's say, and getting back to the thing about investing or trading or speculating, should I just sit tight? Like, if I don't know what I'm doing, but I already have some, should I just sit tight and just see where it goes? Or should I? The thing is,
if you want to have some Bitcoin, it doesn't hurt to have that as to balance out a portfolio. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's just a matter of being aware of the fact that it's volatile. It's going to go up and down more than you might be comfortable with. But then again, we've seen stock market crashes like the 2008 crash in the U.S., which was scary for people in the U.S. who had their investments, and it dropped quite a significant amount. But it's recovered since then, and if you look at then to now it's the markets are much higher, and it's a much more buoyant environment, and that's the nature of things. Things will go up and down. So the only thing I can say that I say to people is hashtag HODL. Just buy and hold
That is not investment advice. It's just what some people are doing.
That's exactly right. Just hold on for dear life, because you don't know when it's going up and down. It's like a roller coaster. But there's people, in fact, there's an interesting discussion thread that I've seen in one of my discussion groups where people are talking about using trading bots. And the trading bots are with a number of different trading styles there, and they're just sitting there and they're trading for you all day long. And some guys are claiming they're making 10 or 15% per day. Other guys are claiming that they're making 1% per day or losing money. And, I would say one thing. There's one aspect that I've seen which I'd like to just talk about just briefly. It goes slightly off topic, but when you talk about investing and getting started, I just want to share something with our listeners, which I think is really important. There's a growing trend that I've spotted about these things called HYIPs or HYIPs, which are sort of investment vehicles, but I don't believe any of them to be really honest vehicles, where they're claiming you'll get 3% per day if you have money with them. They'll give you that in returns from Bitcoin trading. I think there's putting your money into these kind of fake vehicles, or actually using an automated bot where it's legitimate. People are trying different trading strategies, or there's putting your money into known entities like hedge funds who are actually legitimately trying to trade this stuff. All I would say is just be aware of when you're starting out where you're putting your money. Don't put it into one of these unknown vehicles. Do your research. Make sure it's a real and valid vehicle, because a lot of these other fake vehicles that aren't actually trading but are just taking people's money and then shutting down, there's a lot of them out there. And I really would hate to hear that any of our listeners actually encountered anything like that, because that would just make, would really be, I'd feel really sad from that, knowing that I've tried to help people to tell them not to do that. So first and foremost, go to a mainstream vendor that you know about, whether it's Coinbase or Gemini or any of the others that I mentioned, or use credit card services, or use a Bitcoin ATM and deposit the money, into a wallet that way. But, or if you're going to do it with an investment bank or an investment manager, make sure you research who they are before you put your money in. Make sure you can meet them face to face or get them on the phone. But don't just go to random websites and invest, because that's not the way to get started. And really, this is all about how to get started in a legitimate and in a safe way.
So if it sounds too good to be true,
it's too good to be true.
It's probably too true. Right?
I mean, well, and look, like I said, Bitcoin is an example. It's volatile. It goes up and down, and a lot of cryptocurrencies go up and down. But that's not going to give you a day-to-day return of 3% every single day. You're going to be down sometimes for 1 or 2 weeks. You might be down 20%. So you can't guarantee someone 3% per day, even if you try to even it out, because all the coins have had days, weeks, or periods of time where they've just been down for a while. You can't smooth that out and make it a guaranteed percent per day. I just wanted to make sure I shared that with people, because part of the whole thing about getting into anything that's new is knowing where to start and making sure you start in the right places. And I'm passionate about this. I don't want people to lose their money on this. I want people to make sure they know what they're getting into, and that's why we have these chats.
That's a great point. And yeah, what is Warren Buffett's? I think he's got the rules of investing. Rule number 1 is don't lose money, and then I think rule number 2 is see rule number 1.
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
Right?
the,
So
the, the
yeah,
HIPs that I was referring to, they're called high yield investment programs, HYIPs, and they're typically listed as Ponzi schemes or investment scams that promise unsustainably high returns on investment by paying previous investors with the money invested by new investors. And that's where people get
that's
confused by, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme or not? Bitcoin is legitimately a digital currency, but these HYPs or HIPs, which however you pronounce it, are absolutely not. And so, I just want people to have that as a takeaway from this, chat today.
yeah. So as part of that growth curve, right? You've got the good idea, then you have the good intentions, and followed by the not so good intentions.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's always going to be scams. So yeah, I guess we're coming up on our time here for this episode, Steve. But like this has been really interesting, and I hope it's been a real eye opener for the listeners. What I've got so many questions too, right? So like some of the things that we can talk about, I guess in the next episode is we've covered how to sort of look at Bitcoin or cryptos in general, and then some number of ways to buy it, and then what about keeping your investment secure, right? So first,
Yeah, so
like
how
not
to
losing
hold
money,
it, where to store it, and where to trade it. So, I think our next episode should be, and I think this will be an exciting episode really, is about exchanges, blockchain ledgers, wallets, and just all the stuff that's kind of the meat and bones about what makes cryptocurrency operate and work and how to keep your wallet secure. Because, of course, people are going to say, first of all, what is a wallet? So that's the cliffhanger. What's a wallet? And we're going to tell you all next week on the Coin Chat.
and I myself can't wait to find out.
So, thank you all for listening in. And until next time, signing off from Steve Good and David Wang.